You are listening to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa. This show is dedicated to those who live and love from the heart in infinite ways. In today's episode, we will discuss, share, gain insights, and get clarity on the wisdom and teachings of the mystic and seer Almin, as well as discover more about the miraculous healing modality called Belvaspata. Your host for this show is Paul.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Radio Belvaspata, South Africa. In tonight's show, we're going to be discussing about why the world has gone mad, becoming a contradiction. We're going to talk about questions posed to Almin about immediate manifestation, and we're going to be talking about all the experiences and emotions that go on this healing journey as we enter different states of resurrection through the ascension process. Please note that this show is pre-recorded. It is not live, so if you are leaving comments, we will not be able to respond to you this evening, but please continue to do so because we will be reading them and perhaps be able to answer them next week. If you wish to connect with us in the meantime, please do get hold of us either through our website, through our email, through Facebook, through Instagram, or any of the methods that we have online for you to get hold of us. We've got some great audio clips coming up from Almin as well, and we'd like to just share that this evening can be a beautiful class with Almin as we go into some different details and processes and experiences. We'll see you soon.
Sexuality is changing on Earth. It is becoming less necessary to actually copulate to have sexual interaction with another. It is becoming far easier that sexuality is actually lived out as the blissful and rapturous experience of blending fields. Because even a smile, even the look in someone's eyes, the opening of their heart to such an extent of intimacy that their godhood shines forth, and yours does too, creates a touching of the essence of existence with the essence of existence. Nothing can compare to this, and sexual intercourse doesn't begin to equate. This is where we're heading. It is intense, it brings very strong rapture, and such a satisfaction that lasts for days. It is not necessary for the transient experience to be the only way of experiencing sexuality. No, indeed, sexuality is metamorphosing to something far more grand, beautiful, intense. It doesn't mean that physical touching and the appreciation of one another's body is excluded from this. It simply means that whatever else comes is but just frosting on the cake.
I want to very briefly recap the 9 concepts of awareness of the spiritual Toltec warriors. Number 1 is they believe that the universe is basically the emanations of the ego. Now, I've explained to you that the eagle is this huge central sun with the spiraling white light and dark light arms that encompasses all of creation in this waveform universe. And usually if you understand one universe, you understand the others. It's just, different emanations, but the same principle. If you understand the universe, you understand yourself. And that there are, gazillions of light beams coming out of the central source of energy that they called the ego, and they call this the emanations of the ego. And the emanations of the ego is what would determine what stage play we're in. I have spoken before about how we are traversing a beam of light that comes from the central sun of our universe, and that the Buddha came in halfway through. It's 5,200 years wide. And that at the end of it, we tend to go into gross material values. We're in the end of it now. But it is a specific way of being. This is different than the fibers, but yet it is also an emanation of the ego. The different types of light. And there are engineers in our universe that specifically work with getting populations on track to be in sync with the experiences that the beams of light that they go through are presenting them. That's why these avatars or masters have been coming in here trying to get us back on track. Because our DNA had been tampered with and we fell out of sync with the specific 5,200-year-old wide beam that we're going through. But concept number one is that all life emanates from the unknowable ego. Concept number two is that fibers of light is sent from the center of it, and reality is determined by which fibers we are in. That's concept of awareness number two. Concept of awareness number three is that we too have, just like the central sun of the universe, because it is truly so that if you understand yourself, you understand the universe. Some of the most mystical teachings that I will be teaching pertains very much to this point, so please bear it in mind. But we too have billions of little clusters of fibers that come from the central sun of our universe, which is our life force center, which is right behind the belly button. And remember how we said that time flows in a flat figure 8, the clockwise loop before you and the counterclockwise loop behind you, and where it crosses is right behind the belly button. So where it crosses is the now. And so if you're living in the now, then you're living in your place of power, because that's where it crosses, is in your life force center. And so the flat figure 8 was called the Zavuya by the ancients. So from your central sun, these light fibers emanate outwards, and they form what is called the man's luminous cocoon. 1 arm length upwards, above the head. Well, actually, it's if you extend your arm all the way up. Yeah, that's how high, that's where it goes to. The horizontal axis is your arms extended outward. That is how big your luminous cocoon is. On the surface, now, it can sometimes move slightly inwards of this cocoon, more or less between the scapula of your back, the shoulder blades, tiny bit to the right usually, is the tennis ball size ball of white light. So that is the fourth issue, that we have this awareness point, and that this awareness point or assemblage point lights up a certain cluster of fibers. When we're babies, it kind of moves around a bit, but through social conditioning and repetition, it settles so that we look at life the same as everybody else. So all of us see the podium, all of us see the blackboard, all of us see yellow when we look at my outfit, unless we're colorblind, okay? But we're all seeing the same things. Differences in tastes are accounted for by the fact that it isn't exactly on the same place, but it is more or less on the same fibers. The number one goal is to achieve fluidity of that assemblage point. You see that awareness occurs when this assemblage point lights up specific fibers. Do you guys get this? When it lights up different fibers, we have a different assemblage point. The final concept of awareness that is taught by the Toltecs is that it is our pathway and our sacred duty to get to a place where we can access all experiences available to man. Because we are to integrate all of these things within ourselves. The 7 bands of man. Again, you will find the same issue, the same situation corresponding with universal consciousness. And how this is done, just to again say, it's done by stilling the internal dialogue. Stilling the internal dialogue is the result of the utilizing of these tools that we have been discussing. Now, I'm going to tell you something I find completely fascinating. What really is recapitulation? Well, recapitulation is the cleaning up of pollution of the fibers in the luminous cocoon or the regeneration of ones that have weakened. Let me give you an experience and an example, and I'm going to have to think of one now. Well, I remember when I was 8. See, my father used to say that if Almin tells you something, he would put his head on a chopping block because her honesty was that secure. Okay? He would put his head on a chopping block if I told him that this was in the garden or this had been done because of the honesty issue. And the first time I remember lying to my parents was when I was 14. It hurt so badly. My whole body felt like suddenly a piece of me had left. And it had, because untruth actually lowers the vibratory rate. And then a very high being can't stay in the body, so they have to go above the body. And so when I was 14, I told my mother, because I didn't want to go to the darn church, you know. I told her I got lost when I didn't. So I finally had to go fess up that I didn't get lost. I sat around the corner and waited. So, but I was 14 before I told the first lie. And what I remember is that 2 incidences happened that cut me like a knife. And it has been a lot of work, and I'm not sure I'm completely out of the woods, but when somebody actually does not believe that what I'm speaking is the truth, or believe that I'm lying, it cuts like a knife again. So somewhere it's not fully recapitulating. But when I was 8, well, actually, one happened when I was 6. I was 6, we were living in Pretoria, South Africa. My brother was 8 years older than I, and he came up to me and he said, "Sis, I'll give you a buck." Okay, it was a rand in those days. "I give you a buck if you can tell me what is the next card I'm going to pick out of this card deck." So I said, "Okay, it's the Queen of Hearts." So he picked it out, and it was the Queen of Hearts. So I said, "Where's my buck?" So he said, "You did this? You saw it. You peeked around the edge when I said, "No, I didn't. I just guessed." So I said, "Where's my buck?" Well, I didn't get my buck. Because the more I tried to explain to him, I just had a feeling, because I could see it in my head, that he was going to pull out the Queen of Hearts, and therefore I demand my buck. And the sense of injustice inside, man, I was really upset. So finally, I was making such a fuss over my darn buck. It wasn't the buck I wanted. It was the principle of the thing. Because now something that I had done, which I thought was rather clever, had been turned into a nefarious act. And I was very, very mortified by this. So I called my mother over. I said, "Mom, he promised me." In fact, the word promise was a big deal for me. If somebody said promise, that was it. And he promised me, and I did it. And she asked him, he said, "Yes, I did it, but it was just a little joke." She says, "Oh, it was just a little joke." Because my mother had 2 different sets of values and attitudes, one for my brother, whom she absolutely adored, about as much as I adore my son. But, see, she didn't have the justice of not doing to treat us both the same. If I had done that, she would have been horrified that I could be that dishonest. For him, it was just a little joke. Okay, 2 things happened. I lost fibers to my brother. I feel like he took something from me that day. And that day, I made a decision. I made a decision that I would like for the rest of my life not to put myself in a position where people judge my integrity. Well, I'm in the wrong job then, but I tried. I watched how through my childhood I tried to always stay. I wouldn't do any competitions. I wouldn't do anything because people would judge my integrity. And when I was 8, again, my mother accused me of doing something, which shall go unnamed. She accused me of doing something, and I couldn't even fit the thought in my head. I was speechless. I tried to explain to her, I could no more do that than the man in the moon. It doesn't even fit in my head. So I kept trying to explain. And what I realized happened, I got polluted fibers in from my mother. The first experience with my brother, the polluted fiber that came in was that men get away with more things than women. Yeah? Well, I might have done the same thing because I grew wiser and my son is the youngest. So it was, darling, do eat some peas. And with the oldest one, it was eat every pea. And by the middle one, it was, would you eat 3 peas, And this is how it went. So there's not always been very standardized treatment there either. But, that is what I gathered that men were going to be treated differently in this world than women. And that polluted my fibers. The piece that I lost, the fibers that degenerated, was the concept that if I was honest, it would be self-apparent. So in recapitulating your life, you actually restore the fibers of your luminous cocoon. And guess again what the result is? Power, strength, clarity of vision, because you're no longer seeing by the pollution of other people's concepts that have been placed in your fibers. I realized, actually, I might have told you folks this, but I realized even last September that I still had that problem. My son and I had a verbal bantering on left brain versus right brain, because right now he's working at the White House as we speak. Right now, he's preparing to, go after a Rhodes Scholarship and things, and he's very much in his left brain. And, but he points out that he adores music. He plays Vivaldi and all these operas and things, and he absolutely loves poetry, so that's right brain. But still, you see, it's not in the stillness of right brain. It's in the artistic, but it is not in the intuitive. It is still part of that internal dialogue to allow analysis of art to go on. It's different than the experience of it. So, in the evening, I had to give a little lecture. So I was giving a lecture to the group of people that I took to Peru, and I was speaking about this, and afterwards he was really angry with me. He said, Mom, I don't like being lectured to. Oh my gosh, it cut me to the quick. It felt like the time my mother accused me of something. How could she have such a low opinion to think such a thing would fit in my head? How could he have such a low opinion? I had just gained some insights on our conversation. I shared them during the lecture. I assumed that in the spirit of back and forth thing like we do, he would come back with some answers afterwards, which would give me food for thought, and then I'd come back a day later and say, yeah, but what about this? That's the spirit I gave it in, because firstly, for me to lecture him would actually mean that I am trying to do the slavery of the mind, which is called social conditioning. All of this, the erasing of personal history, the recapitulation, the altering of our world view, which we need to talk about, has to do with overcoming social conditioning. So, for me, I've never given him social conditioning. I simply shared the highest wisdom I have and listened to his. And he actually felt, before I did, this issue of why we are all one. I understood it intellectually only, but I didn't get it. He got it at 13 before I did. And he tried to explain it to me. I still couldn't get it. 2 years later, I got it. Okay, but I've always listened to him. And I couldn't understand why it would be that, he would think that I would be functioning with him from such a low level. And because I felt hurt, I realized there was a knee-jerk reaction going on, so I said nothing. I just simply went to bed. And the next morning I understood where the knee-jerk came from. It came from the fact that in my life, people have always assumed that I am functioning with the motives of a first grader. And that's the part that has hurt over and over and over. And it began with that incident with my mother. And I was at the age of 8. I remember it distinctly. So recapitulation is, the intention of that is to purify your fibers by getting rid of others' ideas that they have imprinted in you through these traumatic events and the loss of some of your own.
Today's show is entitled Becoming a Contradiction, Immediate Manifestation and the Journey. And in the website Almin Diary, there's a beautiful post that was put up a few days ago, and Almin is commenting about why the world has gone mad and what to do about it. And she says, it is the integration of opposites that the mind cannot cope with. It is used to labeling and then giving value to opposites. This is good, that is bad. It doesn't know what to do when those two merge. And that's by the Seer Almin. Absolutely incredible. Comment along the way, and of course we're going to be listening to an audio clip in a few moments connected with that. A question was posed on a recent diary post to Almin about why the world has gone mad and what to do about it. And in brief, Almin speaks about the increase of insanity as a kind of fallout that can arise when the world, entrenched in mind, becomes affected by the few entering into resurrection. Almin replies that to the question which was posed, dearest Almin, would this mean that the gap between cause and effect would no longer exist and immediate manifestation would occur? As chaos has served its purpose to get us out of stagnation, and now the potential of new growth is by grace, it would be no surprise that people who are stuck in duality and asleep at the wheel, so to speak, might go mad. And then Almin does answer. She says, in looking at the future, it would seem that the chaos you referred to might last another 300 years, as the old ways of being human disintegrate. I see the light bearers of the planet evolve during this time, and the rest of humanity destructure. That means that the gap will continue to widen, and it becomes essential that we live from a higher reality, and in brackets, create heaven on earth in our homes. What you describe as more immediate manifestation is accurate for us. It will seem to us as though people around us are becoming more untrustworthy, more inept, and scattered, etc. And then a note was made that Messages for Light Workers will post a more detailed description about why the higher reality has more immediate manifestation.
In seeing the daily news of attacks everywhere on citizens, within family members, killing one another, etc., we are left wondering, has the world gone mad? And actually, the answer is yes. And the answer pertains to the material we have been discussing in looking at the resurrection and the different forms of light that it generates, etc. Let's take a look at it very closely. When we go into resurrection, a very extraordinary thing happens. Transcendence lifts us into a whole new reality. But it is a reality that has left duality behind. The world of opposites becomes integrated. Hot and cold become integrated. Sleep and wakefulness becomes integrated. It is the integration of opposites that the mind cannot cope with. It is used to labeling and then giving value to opposites. This is good, that is bad. It doesn't know what to do when those two merge. And you might ask, well, the people where this is happening aren't people that have gone into resurrection. Resurrection is such a major step for even one of those who walk among humanity to accomplish, that it is a puzzle piece that changes its shape completely, and therefore all the pieces of the puzzle have to reconform. It's a fractal shape in the middle of the fractal pattern that changes, and all the patterns around it has to change. If it's dramatic enough of a change, that is what happens. And resurrection is. So no, they may not be resurrecting the masses where these things are happening. However, they are affected by those who are resurrected. And it creates madness because the mind doesn't know what to do with becoming a contradiction.
opposites unite. Well, what are we going to do about this? Because the world is indeed experiencing attacks in many countries all over the world on its citizens. And madness, even amongst those who we come in contact with on a daily basis. Insanity in their reactions. What are we going to do about it? Well, today we're going to learn another interesting fact about opposites. View the fabric of life as a beautiful weaving. Then see somebody make a gash in it with a knife, and because the tapestry is pulled relatively tight, say over a frame, it opens up like a wound. It makes a gap in between. That means opposites have form. Between opposites there is a gap. A gap of what? A gap of knowledge. A gap of answers. Can you see where this is going? Because I have said to you that those who go into that third level resurrection, where a white light is generated, that is not just any white light. It is a white light with very specific sacred qualities. It is brilliantly white, because white light is that which carries answers. This carries all possible answers as they change moment by moment. We become the glowing bright light of the Akashic living records. We have the answers. The answers is that which fills the gap between opposites. Now, when the opposites are apart, and then they just suddenly come together, now there's no longer opposites, the mind goes into insanity. However, if you have two poles that have pulled apart, there's a gap in between, and you fill that gap, which is a gap of knowledge, with answers. Even though, as I explained in our online seminar that will be coming up in October, even though we may not need those answers, they are there for us. That eliminates the need for demons to embody the questions. It eliminates the need for mind to go into insanity because the gap is closing. The gap is closing with answers so that it doesn't befuddle and confuse the mind by being a contradiction. Hot and cold are the same thing is different than there is a range of answers that combine them into a cohesive answer, and that the mind can deal with. So if we generate the white light, how do we do that? In the first level, we generate the magenta. In the second level, we generate the violet light. And in the third level of resurrection, we generate the gold light of glad expectations. When you put those together, they make white light, because the three of them contain all the primary colors. The colors combined create the white light. And then a sacred metamorphosis happens with the white light. And that change in the white light is that becomes all-knowing, living, ever renewed, and it becomes such a font of knowledge that there is no need for any creature to embody chaos.
Team Belvaspata Healing South Africa facilitates one-on-one, group or distant healings utilizing a cutting-edge angelic healing modality that harmonizes and balances using a combined process of light and frequency. This cosmic healing modality has various protocols available that will assist in the transformation, transmutation and transfiguration of many areas of life. Visit our website on www.belvaspata.co.za for complete information, and also link to us on Facebook under our name Team Belvaspata Healing South Africa. You may also send an email to belvaspata@anua.co.za. You can join our WhatsApp discussion group for daily posts and trending information and updates from Almin, the seer and mystic. Message us via either Facebook, email, or on the station's commentary section. We will now return to the online chat show, hosted by Team Belvaspata South Africa and our guests for the day.
And welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. My guest this hour is the mystical teacher known as Almin. Almin, you know, I have to admit that before I met Sandra, who had been a guest on the show a couple of times, I had not heard of you or your teachings, and I'd like to think I try and get out there and meet a lot of people. So I'm just curious I know you've been a teacher and working as a healer for many years. What brought you to this path? Were you always sort of on a mystical path in your life, or was this something that developed later on?
You know, there's a little background to that, and it is that when I was approximately 19 years old, it was as though my life began and I was simply dropped in the middle of a society that seemed very strange to me. Everything before is a memory that feels a bit like a dream. And so this experience of just profound, let's just call it awakening, led me to search everywhere for answers. And I've gone through multiple periods of shamanism and healing through the membered oneness and so on, only to often return there. The search has been very prevalent in my life.
And so before that time of this awakening when you were 19, I mean, had you been doing meditation? Had you been studying stuff? Or was it just something very much out of the blue?
I started studying world religions in a second language when I was 6 years old. I was actually a little Afrikaans kid, and they were written in English, so I taught myself English, and I started reading them at the age of 6. And I used to have to hide them under my mattress. My parents were sure I was going to be a heretic.
Wow. So you always had sort of the inclination,
yes.
But it wasn't until the age of 19. And where in Africa were you from originally?
From South Africa, Cape Town.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. We've had a number of wonderful teachers from South Africa on the show over the years. And so at what point did you feel, as you were studying and seeking answers, did you feel that you found your own path? Because what you do, I mean, with the healing work, the Belvaspata, and the other, and the sigils and all the things you do is something, at least I feel, is very unique to you. At what point did you kind of feel like you found your own path as opposed to following someone else's?
It happened on January the 5th, 2005, actually. Before that, I was walking around in this state of just highly anticipated, almost anxiety that life is about to change so unforeseeably that I am not prepared for it. And it did on the 5th. I started to have massive visions. I was pulled into the underworld. I found myself on the 24th of that month standing in front of the Ascended Masters on a massive round crystal floor that was like a seer stone. And they were gathered in this circular seating, and I found myself standing on that floor. And they asked me, state your purpose, which, is not an answer that comes very easily to most people because they're mostly into questions rather than feeling they have found their purpose.
Right.
But the answer just came that it was to lead myself from freedom of illusion and then show others how I step so they can do the same.
And so once you sort of stated that purpose, did they guide you and give you these gifts, or did just things start to naturally unfold for you?
Unbelievable events transpired right after that. Apparently, the Earth was going through, it had begun on its ascension up into light. And there was major work to be done by the light workers of the Earth to do with thinning illusions so that the membranes were able to open as the Earth moved through them into higher dimensions. This started at the end of January, literally on the first day of February. February is always a very, very important month. It's the cosmic new year when time maps change, apparently. So that began working with hidden realms in a way that I had never thought possible. And eventually I struggled, and I needed the assistance. 6 spirits came into my home to help with this process. My teaching methods had to change completely and dramatically, and half my student base left.
Oh, wow.
They thought completely that I must have lost it. So this began then.
So you had already built up a sort of a bit of a following. You're already teaching people.
Yes, I had.
But at this point, it was such a dramatic shift in what was going on. I guess some people couldn't deal with the dramatic shift, and other people did stay with you.
And I started to teach publicly in 97.
Oh, okay.
And so I had, at that point, quite a student base, and this dramatic shift, as you said, was not acceptable to many.
Right.
But I started to work with the hidden realms, and I struggled with the languages. And towards October of 2005, suddenly it clicked. And one day I could completely telepathically speak to any race in its own language. And I could speak it, I could write it, and I could translate it.
Oh, wow. So this was sort of a gift that you got or something that you developed where then the communication became much easier for you and much more clear so that you understood.
It's incredible blessing. I speak whatever. If angels don't always have the same language.
Right.
And there are angel gods and there are angels and archangels and they have different languages, and I get communications on a daily basis from beings, and to be able to know their languages, it's invaluable.
I'm sure as you've walked on your path and with all these tremendous things happening, that there must always be, some little times of self-doubt, of self-questioning, of like, am I going crazy or is this real? How do you keep yourself centered when you have those moments or glimpses, or maybe you don't, I don't know, but I know most of us usually do. How do you keep yourself centered and like keep feeling like you are moving forward in the right way?
Well, there's a couple of things. First are there times that, and there is not a lot of time. My day starts now at 4 a.m. in the morning, and I work most of the day. But the tools that pour forth and the classes that I teach in every instance is something that I could not possibly have known ahead of time. So everything I do is brand new to me. And that's why you mentioned how prolific my books are being produced. That's why. Because they come out of this total silence within, and there isn't thought given to them. So all I need to do is sit down and write. And I can do that into eternity. Wow. And sometimes these records hover in the air in front of me. And when they do, there is no doubt that that's the next one that I have to translate. And we've been able to photograph them We've also been able to
Really?
photograph scrolls that come up from above my head, and you see them, multiple scrolls becoming clearer and clearer, and then the clear one rests on my head.
Wow.
And it's usually when I'm speaking to my class from one of the records.
Wow.
There isn't much room for self-doubt, if you know what I mean, because firstly, the losing of mind, oh my gosh, I've lost that a long time ago. There is just silence there, and unless there is some form of deduction necessary, I can go for days without sleep because I don't register that I'm tired until I have to do something like a math problem.
Ah, interesting. So would you say then that you really live more from your heart as opposed to from your mind, as most people do?
I've gone through stages, and from the mind, I spent years bringing in tools to organize mind so that it's a tool and not a tyrant, and so that it can actually use so little energy that aging will stop, and secondly, that it doesn't drain the energy required for the non-cognitive messages, because less brain will suck up everything it can, and if there's something left, then it will only interpret the non-cognitive. So there's been many years that, before 2005, I worked as a philosophical Nagual, which is a specific form of Nagual that uses perception to set one free from your boundaries. And I worked as that, so the cerebral was very important to me as a tool of stretching one beyond your existing paradigms. After that, I went into oneness with such profound bliss, I could hardly move, and had to sort of fight my way through into my daily life because I had just adopted a beautiful little Native American girl at the time, and I had to be her mother. And so this heart-based was oneness with deep, deep, deep bliss. And as I went from total emptiness into total fullness, everything was me and speaking to me. And I used to hear this message: live where the curved line and the straight line meet. And I heard it over and over again. And finally, I realized that the next stage beyond that is the combining of the cerebral and the heart. And then the stage that goes beyond that is the state of, it's a resurrected state, and it's a state of pure beingness. It's a place where you're no longer living from light and love. You've become divine compassion, which is like tonal luminosity. It's like the two elements combine into one. And you realize that life and death and ascension are but mirrors in life. And you've stepped out of the mirrors and you use them only as tools. So it's a stage that I only fully entered in August. And it's quite an amazing experience.
So we have to take another break in a moment, but I just wanted to ask you, it sounds like your experiences and your teachings are so esoteric and so profound. I imagine that the vast majority of people who are attracted to you and your teaching are people who have maybe already been on a spiritual path, have already studied maybe other mystery schools or esoteric knowledge, or do you find that, people even with no background in spirit come to you as well?
Well, see, every class I teach, none of us know anything. Because what I'm going to teach is brand new to me as well. So really, all the study that you may have done, it's literally of no value when information is coming in that hasn't ever been there before. And so in the first day, it's usually a very full plate for people. But by the end of the workshop, they absolutely know what's going on. And I have found that to be truly, truly the case.
So it's really like people don't even need to come with any background. They don't need to read any of your books or anything. They just show up, and what comes.
What the books help with is that we have the same vocabulary. Because if I'm talking about things that are outside the realm of mind, then I have to sort of make up my own vocabulary. Yeah. And although I do my best to explain it, it makes it easier. And my work is brand new every day, actually, but it has never contradicted itself. And the manuscripts I handwrite, they are stacks that are at least 3 times my height at this point.
Wow.
But not one time has it contradicted. It has always just evolved.
Wow. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay.
Really, that's for me the biggest miracle.
That is truly amazing. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I really do want to talk about sort of in today's world, so many people talk about oneness versus duality, and really what that means in your life, and how it can help us to sort of get past these concepts in our daily lives. Okay?
Sure.
Wonderful. So everybody, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, and we'll be back in just a moment. And welcome back. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, and we're talking this hour with mystic and teacher Almin. So, Almin, these days in the spiritual community, you hear people talking a lot about oneness versus duality and getting to sort of the state of non-duality. And in society today, we're so bombarded with, things that we consider evil and awful and horrible. And how do you get past these concepts when we're bombarded with these images of war and strife and starvation and real suffering, real human suffering?
All right. Well, I think perhaps if I could divide your question into 2 sections.
Okay.
Because first of all, the issue of duality and oneness, it would be helpful if we at least sort of are all on the same page with what that means.
Yes.
And if I could take a quick few minutes and just explain from my perspective what I have discovered about those.
Okay.
Because obviously we would think that oneness is more desirable than duality. But oneness not having opposites, but incorporating the opposites within. However, oneness itself is an opposite to duality. And the more you emphasize the one of any couple of dual pairs, of one side of the stick is more emphasized than the other is going to go deeper into its role. In addition, you have to eventually pay the piper. So at some point, oneness will get so battered that it is pulled back into the game of separation. You can only stay in it so long. It's like life and death and the rebirth cycles that creates because they're opposites.
Okay.
So the goal would be not to get into oneness, but to get to the place where there is no opposite inherent in oneness. So let me sort of give a summary of what I mean by that. And summary is kind of hard to do with this because it pertains to the movement of the cosmos. It's which movement are we going to adhere to of this big tutorial in-breath and out-breath of God, as the Hindus call it. Duality. Duality functions like a stick, and both sides of the stick are pulling in opposite directions. That creates the density necessary from the tension that arises from 2 opposite pulls. The tension creates density that makes physical life. If somebody goes into oneness, then they have become the whole stick. But really, why it's still not an escape is what it has done is that it has taken the dual nature of life and internalized it. Instead of living on one end of the stick or the other, you have become the entire stick. The problem there is that when you try and incorporate 2 opposites, what happens is that they cancel each other out because they still exist separately. So if you move beyond either duality or oneness, you can get to a state in which there has to be an incorporation and an integration of these into a mutual field, but they express separately in the form of emphasis. In other words, you live two things at once that are opposites, but one is emphasized more than the other. And a good example is the masculine and feminine within each of us. We're emphasizing either the feminine or we're emphasizing the masculine.
Right.
That's all there is. And but they are both present. So we have to actually get beyond duality and oneness. Otherwise, the more the light workers go into oneness and into the bliss that is associated with oneness, and it's extremely addictive, by the way.
Yes.
So as you go into the oneness with that bliss, the more of us go into that, the more the other side of the stick overpolarizes into, might I say, these heinous things that you are mentioning. So how incredible is that? That light workers actually, the more light there is that they become, the more they promote this distortion. So the study of how to integrate it is very much what my work is about. Because it's a journey I've walked through all of these stages, so I've mapped it out and I understand a little better, though this journey never ends and there's daily something I don't understand, but I do understand a little better what is required to live beyond duality, whether you are in oneness or in separation consciousness.
So you're really, if I catch your meaning, it's really about sort of integration and balance. It's not about being at one extreme or the other, but it really kind of being in the middle, being centered.
Yes, that's actually very well said. Wish I had thought of it that way. Good and succinct. I like that. And, you know, I've always said that countries like India, where the masters are in this absolute bliss and they walk past hungry children on the sidewalk and things like that without a single hesitation, because it's karma, everything's in divine perfection, so no action needed, even though the child's right in front of my feet. A state like that actually attracts war.
Yes.
Because let's say a whole society were to go into oneness, for sure they would attract war, because the other option is stagnation. Because there's very little movement when you are in oneness in the fields around the body, so you don't generate a lot of energy. Eventually, you start to drain energy, and you stagnate. And when life stagnates, war always comes, because it's a very profound energy source.
Right. I mean, there's that old expression that either you're growing or you're dying.
Very good, yes.
Yes. So for somebody's sort of personal practice in their own life, do you have recommendations of what people can do to sort of live more integratedly, or to sort of live in a way that's going to promote taking things to a different level, so that we can work out sort of these strife and these difficult things we find around us?
I do. In fact, there's two things we can do, particularly pertaining to the very aggravated news that we are confronted with, the killings and starvation and things like that. There's particular techniques for that, just to focus on that. Firstly, we attract what we focus on. I don't have any television in my home that can access news channels and things like that. There's carefully chosen movies that I watch with my beautiful daughter, and that's it. Because if I am going to take up the mantle of divinity, of creating reality, which is a key concept, that we take up that responsibility rather than being spectators, that we become the sacred government through self-government. That's my second concept. But it's important then that where I focus, life will flourish. Do I really want to focus on such bad news?
Right.
If it happens to be in my face, it's mine to look at. Now, if that's the case, let's say that there is a specific horrific case of child abuse.
Right.
If it's outside of us, it is inside of us.
Right.
So where in ourselves do we abuse our inner child?
Right.
Is there enough fun and lightness and play, or is it delegated to a dark corner and fed crumbs?
Right.
So to change within, to change life without, is the way to respond to the bad news.
Right. So really to look at it as a reflection of what is going on inside of us, that if it's showing up in our in our own personal world somehow, it's because there's something internal within us.
Yes, that we need to look at.
Right.
And, we spoke about duality and oneness. In duality, life is a reflection. And life is hard because reflection is always opposite in the mirror. If you hold a newspaper up, the letters are backwards.
Right.
And if the yin and the yang are opposite each other, the masculine and feminine, in duality, that means they're hostile to one another. And as you go into oneness, life becomes an expression, which means life becomes a graceful image of what you are.
Right.
So it changes there.
Right. I'm afraid we realize this is only an hour show. Unfortunately, I was just telling Janice, our engineer, that I need about 3 hours to talk with you. But we have to take another quick break. And when we come back, I want to just touch upon maybe very briefly some of the things that you've mentioned on your website and maybe give people some kind of things to help them with their own personal growth, as I am very much focused on empowering people. Okay, Almeen?
Sure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Everybody, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, and we will be back in just a moment. And welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. My guest this hour has been the mystical and spiritual teacher, Almeen. Almeen, this is our last segment, so I really would like to be able to give our audience something of value that I understand it's so hard because the things you talk about are so deep and so esoteric that a lot of it needs the background and the description to really understand things. But I'm just wondering if you could give our audience some simple tools or some simple practices to help them when people are having a hard time in their day-to-day life, when they're trying to take their spiritual practice and implement it in their day-to-day life in dealing with friends, families, coworkers, and business. What can you recommend to people to just help them to have a better quality of life by bringing more of spirit into life?
Okay. And I feel the same as you. I feel almost like, gosh, if only I had another hour to speak with you, because there's so many things we're touching on that it would be so much clearer. Yes. But can I suggest something?
Certainly, certainly.
We have online courses month by month, and they're usually $100 a month.
Right.
There is one specific course, which is Entering Godhood course, and it's actually a 3-month course, but each month is a unit that is self-contained.
Okay.
Why don't I give your listeners that first $100 value month free of Entering Godhood?
That would be beautiful.
Because, honey, if they'll just contact my office and mention this show, they'll get it completely for free, and it's 20 days of material.
Wow.
And that is just one of the best things that we can do to see how can you live a reality within a confusing reality but maintain the sanctity of your own. So it's that, I think, is solution number one, if that's okay with you.
Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. It was very generous of you.
And then the second thing is this. I agree with you 100% that spirituality is not practical unless, like the Hopis say, it grows corn. You want to be able to have it make a difference in your daily life.
Right.
But there is a subtle way in which even that which we've spoken of can make a difference without people really realizing it.
Mm-hmm.
Or they will eventually, but not right away.
Right.
See, if you take somebody off the street and you say to them, okay, I mean, here's Joe Blow off the street, you have 15 minutes to make him more powerful than when he walked in the door. Then I will give him something to see about himself, about life, that he has never seen before. And every time somebody's perception spreads beyond their existing paradigm, it releases the constriction of the old vision, which releases a huge amount of resources, and power and consciousness equate. Meaning that if you see new things, new energy flows in, and because you have now more energy, you have more consciousness. And consciousness means how much can we be aware of this incredible world in which we live in at once. So even if there isn't a practice, which I will give in a second here, even if they could just see something that they didn't think of before, it would enhance consciousness.
So
it's
anything...
the basis of a philosophical Nago's way of teaching apprentices, which I did for many years before I started actually having a different mission. But the next thing is this. If we, first of all, understand the preciousness of energy and power, because so often light workers are scared of power, but power is the answer to consciousness. All you have to do is manage it by not becoming a power seeker, but a perspective seeker or a perception seeker, and the power comes effortlessly, and you're on the right track. So to have others in our environment pull us into the distorted games of dysfunctionality, of neediness, of codependence. I give, so now I control, and if I don't control you, then I'm infuriated with you for abandoning me, right? This is the codependent triangle that it's estimated 92% of Americans are living.
Wow.
So this is a draining way to relate.
Right.
If we can start to value the preciousness of our consciousness, we will refuse to engage where it feeds other people by giving them attention through their negative behavior. That's step one.
Okay.
Step two, there's another bank account with a lot of energy in it that we seldom use, that we can use every day. And that is when something negative happens, it is hiding an insight that when we release that insight, again, floods with energy. And it is to recapitulate events that have happened either this day or 10 years ago, but that we feel are affecting our life this moment. And there's 9 steps to it. So do we have time? And I'll quickly give those 9 steps to our listeners.
We have about 3 minutes left to the show, and I want to make sure you have time to give out your website and let people know how to contact you.
Okay,
so if maybe...
I tell you what, all they need to do is to go on one of our blogs or write to our office. We've got customer service people everywhere. Ask for the 9 steps of recapitulation.
Okay.
And it is 5 things that we gain from that experience, and then 4 attitude adjustments that follow. And they'll be happy to just send it to them.
Wonderful. And yeah, and I will definitely, if you wouldn't mind giving people your websites. You have, I know, like 2 or 3 different websites where they can find this information and see your blog, and we'll post it on our Facebook page as well.
All right. Okay, well, Spiritual Journeys, Neys at the end, spiritualjourneys.com.
Okay.
Is a very important one. It's our main website.
Right.
And from there you can find our Facebooks. We've got Facebooks, as you said, in many languages and so forth, our blogs. So we also have the IamPresence.com. And to tell you the truth, I'm not computer literate, so I have no idea what's on what or even the addresses, but they should be able to find everything on spiritualjourneys.com.
Spiritualjourneys.com.
And there's also a little guideline for them
Mm-hmm.
on how to get started because of the vast array of information that's poured in over these years.
Yes, you have. So there's. I mean, I did take a quick look at your websites. There's such a plethora of information. It is amazing. Well, it's been really, really a pleasure having you on the show. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. And,
Thank you. I've enjoyed it immensely.
And where do you usually do your workshops? So we can let our audience know.
Well, we have a Christmas workshop right in my very sacred home that's coming up here in about a week, in a couple of days.
Right.
And there are still a very few places left in that.
Right.
And it's right here in Newport on the Oregon coast. That happens only twice a year.
Okay.
There are also one workshop left with some openings for a personal retreat where people come in a very small group and deep in-depth training is done. And then the rest of the time, our calendar is up. Much of my work is in Europe and Russia. We're in Greece this year, and then Ohio, and many times in Canada.
Okay, so for those in the U.S., it's really Oregon, Ohio, and Canada. It's kind of like the local places.
Yes,
and
Toronto.
Europe and oh, wonderful. Yes, where Sandra's from, who's been on the show.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Almina. If you ever come to New York City, I hope you will get in touch with me and let me know so I can meet your lovely presence in person.
I will. That would be so nice.
And we'll get you here in studio, and you know, maybe we'll have you back on. I would hope to have you back on in the future.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
One of the roles that we've taken on here on Radio Belvaspata South Africa is to inspire the light workers of the world to do more and to work deeper in their own journey into ascension and resurrection. And so I'm always grateful when we pick up beautiful golden orbs and pearls of wisdom that we can share online with everybody. And just watching what everybody posts is a fascinating process because everything links so incredibly well together. As we take that information and as we work with it, we are discovering more and more about ourselves. And this week I was really inspired by a Facebook post by Jeanette Marais, and she posted a post that you should copy from a healer called Matt Licata, and I'd like to read that out for us because I think it is so inspiring and so practical and down to earth. And it starts like this. At times, the exhaustion can be overwhelming. The tired journey of becoming something other than what you are. All the practices, the techniques, the manifesting, the self-improvement. They have left you on the ground, burning up in the longing and yearning for rest. But this is no ordinary moment. For it is out of this holy mess that the most radical invitation can finally be heard. To trust in the flow of your immediate experience exactly as it is. And to participate in the raging truth that nothing is wrong with you and that you are already whole. It is this act of radical non-doing that will untangle the spell of self-abandonment once and for all. Not the non-doing of the mind, which is oriented in passivity, resignation and failure, but that of the heart, which is alive with qualities of warmth, creativity, curiosity and compassion. The miracle is unlocked as you realize that you no longer need to transform, to shift, change, or even heal your experience, but only to fully participate in it, surrounding it with presence and with kindness. It is by way of this alchemy that its essence and nature is revealed. Within the field of what you are, you may be astonished to discover that even your most erupting neurosis, surging triggers and hooks, elaborate ways of self-protection, and penetrating fears of intimacy are revealed to be of the nature of wisdom itself, formed by the intelligence of an out-of-control sort of grace. Inside each and every cell of your open, luminous body is a pathway of transmutation awaiting your participation. Sadness, disappointment, joy, hopelessness, bliss, contentment, and fear, each equally an emissary of the Beloved, appearing as a light in the darkness to reveal one of the qualities of love as it pours into this world. It may seem like such a simple commitment, but in practice it is a revolution. It will reveal that your life has never and could never be a problem in need of fixing, that you were never and could never be broken, and that you need not leave your immediate embodied experience ever again in order to enter the sacred world. For what you are is already unbearably holy. You need no longer seek some other state of consciousness, for that which is here now is outrageously consecrated with pure spirit. You are being asked to surrender the ancient path of abandoning yourself and to practice a wild intimacy with all things. This is your birthright and the foundation of the rest you seek. Stay close, and with a heart and with eyes wide open, the veil will part and the revelation will appear as it is. Written by Matt Licata, posted by Jeanette Marie. Thank you.
You've been listening to Radio Balbaspata, South Africa. Thank you for listening and sharing in our discussion. Should you have any questions with regards to the healing modality of Balbaspata or have any healing needs, please send us an email to info@balbaspata.co.za or add comments to our page on Spreaker.com so we can work on providing a suitable response. We now close this episode with the eternal ascension qualities of love, praise, gratitude and trust, and look forward to sharing again with you next week. Goodbye.